The UCLA women's basketball season is one you don't want to miss. Your top 10 Bruins are well on their way to another Final Four run. We need you to get to Pauley to support this incredible team. Led by Lauren Betts, Gabriela Jaquez, and Kiki Rice, newcomers Gianna Neepkins and Charlize Ledger-Walker. This group plays an exciting brand of basketball and wins. The time is now to come to see these stars in action. Big-time matchups are coming. Go to UCLABruins.com/tickets to secure your seats today. Can't wait to see you in Westwood cheering on the Bruins.
Good afternoon and Happy New Year. Break out the champagne again. Big day to kick off the first full week of 2026. We're getting right down to business here. Doing it live, doing more at 4 weekday afternoons, right after Guy Benson at 3, and just before Randy Wang on the 790 KBC News Blitz at 5. Mottek On Money, live on the air, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at KBC.com, and, of course, the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, KBC.com, Apple iTunes, YouTube, all your favorite podcast platforms. Record-shattering start to the first full week of 2026. Stocks, precious metals, and Bitcoin kicking off the first full week of the year on a high note, with the Dow up nearly 600 points to an all-time high. Closed at 595 to settle at 48,977. Did get above 49,000 for the first time intraday. Oil stocks joining the rally today with the stocks jumping on news that the U.S. ousted Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro in a surprise military operation over the weekend. Chevron, one of the big oil companies still active in Venezuela, saw some of the biggest gains. Chevron shares today moved up nearly $8 at $163 and change. Gold, typically seen as a safe haven in risky times, moving higher again today. Price of gold right now hovering just below $4,500 an ounce. Silver moving higher today. Silver at $76.10 an ounce. Copper moving up 5% to a record high. Bitcoin recovering today as well, trading above 94,000. We'll be taking a closer look at all of this coming up. Ousted Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro pleading not guilty to narco-trafficking charges during his court appearance in a federal courtroom in New York today, defiantly telling the judge there he was still the head of Venezuela despite being taken out by U.S. forces over the weekend. The Venezuelan government for decades has swung between working with and against U.S. oil companies, pushing ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips out of the country in the early 2000s. Even the U.S. and Venezuelan government are able to convince, even if they're able to convince investors of political and legal stability going forward. Analysts warn that current oil prices may discourage investments that span years and total billions, as noted by the Wall Street Journal today. We see the price of oil and all this right now in New York at around 58 and change. Brent crude in London at around 61. I'll discuss the epic news impacting the oil business later this hour with John Kilduff, prominent oil analyst at Again Capital, also CNBC contributor and longtime contributor to this program. John Kilduff will be joining us live. A lot happening in Vegas this week. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang taking the stage today, delivering some good news for investors there. He devoted much of his speech to AI. He's considered the godfather of AI, but he also said that 6 words that should appeal to Wall Street. Vera Rubin is in full production. NVIDIA stock back in focus today. Tomorrow we'll be speaking to Dan Ives from the CES conference. Bank stocks rallied today. Mega deals returning in full force in 2025, and Wall Street already bracing for another wave of merger deals in 2026. The new year also shaping up to be a good year for taxpayers. We'll get an update this afternoon from Grover Norquist, the president of Americans for Tax Reform. Bigger refunds expected, in fact, gigantic. That's the word used by U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent to describe expected refunds this year. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, and the whole works now to kick off the new year. Gabriel Wisdom, managing director at American Money Management and author of Wisdom on Value Investing. Gabriel Wisdom, good afternoon to you and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Frank. We expected 2026 to start with a bang, but a volatile bang, and it surprised pretty much everybody with Venezuela and what occurred there. It's unsettling in that we just don't know what the full effects of this are going to be. President Trump said the U.S. is going to run Venezuela. Its geopolitical fallout might be troublesome. The Chinese might increase the heat on Taiwan. Russia might be less inclined to end the war in Ukraine. We just don't know. But the good news is that earnings forecasts are up about 14.8% year over year, and up another 14.6% annualized for 2027. That's based on a consensus of analysts. We're experiencing a productivity boom, plus interest rates have fallen on the short end. And the president is rolling back some of the tariffs to ease the so-called affordability crisis. So far, so good.
See it tonight, read about it tomorrow, but hear it now on Mottek On Money on 790 KABC. We do it live every weekday afternoon at 4 o'clock, and certainly a great time to have a business show on the air live with you, Gabriel Wisdom. Appreciate that important analysis as always. And in the meantime, the oil stocks have come to life in all of this. We'll be talking more about the impact all this is having on the price of oil from the consumer standpoint as well as from the investor standpoint. We see ExxonMobil getting a bump today. Chevron hitting it big today, up nearly $8 at 163 and change. And some of the oil service names, Schlumberger, or as I heard somebody on the air call it Schlumberger today, it is Schlumberger, moving up nearly $4 at 43 and change. And Halliburton also up a couple dollars to 31 and change. What about the oil names in all this?
Well, Frank, I've considered them the fallen angels of the global markets. And I'm not surprised that, in particular, Chevron would get such a boost because it remains Venezuela's big company. After the seizure of foreign oil assets at the turn of the century, it is absolutely best positioned among the big oil giants to immediately benefit from greater American access to the world's largest crude reserves. Chevron produces about 20% of the country's oil under a sanctions waiver and then ships that crude to U.S. refineries. And the company's been shipping oil from Venezuela even though there's a partial maritime blockade, or there was. So will everybody join the party? Exxon looks like they've got potential opportunity in Venezuela. So does ConocoPhillips. You mentioned Schlumberger, all the oil services. It's going to take about $8 billion initially just to get things up and running down there.
All right, Valero also up 15 and change to 180 and change, in Marathon Oil up nearly 10 at 174 and change. On the air live with Gabriel Wisdom with American Money Management. The precious metals really got a boost. We were joking that was the Burl Ives trade over the holidays of silver and gold. Gold hitting record highs. Silver also along for the ride, seeing a wild ride right now around 76 and change for silver, and gold is just below 4,500. What about this impressive bull run for the precious metals, and what do you see happening there?
It's been really exciting for the metals. Also kind of curious because you wonder, why have precious metals prices been so strong? Are they signaling concerns about excessive stimulus, monetary and fiscal policies that require lots and lots of additional borrowing? Even if the Federal Reserve stops cutting the short-term interest rate, the Fed funds rate, in the first few months, the first couple of quarters of 2026, the Fed says they're committed to buying about $40 billion a month in Treasury bills through April. That does tighten the supply. It keeps interest rates pretty stable. So the curious thing is, do we have inflation or do we have deflation? I think the metals is rolling forward because of the growing green energy demand. Also, platinum, huge winner over what happened in the European Union. They in December decided to reverse their combustion engine bans, and of course, catalytic converters use platinum and palladium. Platinum in particular, been a very strong metal.
Right, platinum, let's bring up the quote here, down around $6 now at $2,279. That has certainly seen a huge jump over the past year. And palladium, let's start mentioning that one too, up about $2 now at $1,768. All the metals, of course, are rallying big over the past year. And that Burl Ives trade certainly paid off over the holidays and basically throughout all of last year. Any thoughts on where gold and silver go from here?
Well, the Standard & Poor's 500, the broad stock market, and the price of gold have historically been inversely correlated in the short term. But over the very long run, they move along somewhat in lockstep. So by that measure, by the end of this decade, by let's say late 2029, we could see gold around $10,000 an ounce. It sounds outrageous in 2026, but at the rate the alternative energy industry is moving and information technology, the demand for metals has never been greater, and I think it's going to increase.
All right, AI, of course, was a big story this past year, and we're kicking off the new year with AI back in focus, with the godfather of AI giving a big speech in Las Vegas at the Consumer Electronics Show, where Dan Ives from Wedbush is there, and he's scheduled to be with us tomorrow afternoon and 24 hours from now. What about AI in 2026?
Well, I want to hear what Dan Ives has to say. He's one of the great analysts of our time, no question. There are AI bubble concerns, and I'm certain that we'll hear from Jensen's speech about them. But this mounting skepticism about AI has everything to do with the fact that these chips become obsolete in 2 to 3 years, not the 5 to 6 years over which they're depreciated by current tax code. So if this is the situation, current earnings are significantly overstated for a lot of these AI players, and they have to spend a great deal of money to build out the infrastructure, the energy complexes. So that's the situation. I think it's one of the reasons why long-term interest rates have hardly budged, while short-term interest rates have gone down several times now.
All right, speaking of interest rates, what do you think the Fed's next move will be?
Well, we have the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which was passed in July. That's going to deliver a major fiscal boost, I think, in the early part of this year. We have some retroactive tax cuts arriving and those lump sum refunds when Americans file taxes. There's other deductions for ticket income. There's a $25,000 deduction for overtime pay. And these things all cost money. And so the Federal Reserve has got to be thinking about the tax refunds. Undoubtedly, it will swell the federal deficit in fiscal year 2026. And then there's the high government debt to our production numbers, gross domestic product ratios. That creates some vulnerability. And then finally, hiring. We're on pace to really maybe add about 5.1 million jobs. We lose about 5.1 million jobs. So there's no net growth there. Inflation's proving pretty sticky. Do we have a stagflationary situation? Well, we're going to find out who the next Fed chair is going to be, and he'll have his hands full.
All right, and in all this, bank stocks rallied today. In fact, Goldman Sachs, the big dog on Wall Street, at more than $34 at $9.48 and change. We see J.P. Morgan Chase, the nation's largest bank, more than $8 at $3.34 and change. Bank of America, nearly $1 at $56.89. Mega deals, as I mentioned earlier, were a big deal this past year, and we're expecting more big corporate merger deals this year. What are your thoughts on the banking names and merger activity as we head into 2026?
Well, I like that whole theme, Frank. That one of the reasons why I think the bank stocks are doing so well is that those areas that they do a good deal of lending on, housing, real estate, auto, have been pretty soft. Home prices, for example, fell maybe 2.4% nationally year over year in the 70 biggest cities anyway. We've got sort of a Japanization consensus that's mounting. There's some deflation. There's $1 trillion trade surplus. What that tells us is there's very weak domestic demand for things. The economy's not as strong as it might appear. And so the banks rally in anticipation of lots of capital that goes to work. And if we were at the top of a boom, the bank stocks would be retreating. So it's a contrarian play. It's contradictory to what your logic might tell you. But bank stocks are a clear indication that we'll have a turnaround by the end of this year.
You're live with Gabriel Wisdom with American Money Management. And Gabriel Wisdom, let me ask you the big question here that we ask as we head into the new year now. Any specific places where you're putting money now and or taking it off the table?
Yes, Frank, it's pretty difficult right now because if you're concentrated in information technology, chips, that sort of thing, all the big winners, the Magnificent Seven, which haven't been so magnificent, you need to broaden your diversification because Goldman Sachs, who you mentioned, who's having a great earnings growth, is forecasting only a 3% annual return over the next decade in the financial market. So where are you going to get the returns? I'm looking at those areas that have been the most depressed. It's a worst to first play. Oil clearly has a future. I want to have positions there. Healthcare's down. A lot of retail players, they're soft. So it's time to shuffle the deck.
All right, we didn't talk about crypto yet, but we did see a nice bounce today with the Bitcoin popping back above 94,000. It's kind of stuck in the mud there over the holidays and now hovering just below 94K. I know as you know, we talked to the biggest fans of crypto here as well as the harshest critics, even to this day. What are your thoughts on crypto here in 26?
That's a hard one for me to handicap, Frank, because there's so many different crypto plays. I know the blockchain is very real and has a lot of utility. In terms of Bitcoin strategy, the company that's been hoarding Bitcoin took a massive loss on their position because of how poorly the crypto did, last year. Now, does it move up from here? Just depends on supply and demand. There's not a lot of supply. That halving event, which it's not that easy to understand, but it happens every few years. It reduces the supply. So if Bitcoin is the leader, Ethereum's been soft as well. I need to take a closer look.
All right, we're going to have some fun doing all of that. Gabriel Wisdom, Managing Director at American Money Management, author of Wisdom on Value Investing. Happy New Year to you and everybody there, Gabriel. Look forward to many conversations here in the new year. Thank you very much for taking the call to kick off the new year with us here.
Thank you, Frank.
Nobody does selling better than Shopify. Shopify is the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret. With Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts go abandoned and way more sales going through. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. On the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more, sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout that Skims uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period for 3 months at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
The UCLA men's basketball season's in full swing, and we need you to get to Pauley Pavilion to support the Bruins. Don't miss a single chance to see this year's exciting team, led by Donovan Dent, Eric Daly Jr., Sky Clark, and Tyler Bilodeau. Pauley Pavilion, presented by Westcon Financials, the home of the greatest tradition in all of college basketball. We can't wait to have you join us as the Bruins continue to build on that legacy. With big-time matchups, go to UCLABruins.com/tickets to secure your seats today before it's too late. Let's get Pauley rocking.
Get ready for The Rush with Max Crosby.
It's time.
Your all-access pass into the heart of the NFL.
This is the National Football League, and they don't play around. You got to be smart.
All-pro defensive end Max Crosby takes you beyond the field with exclusive insights.
I could say this because I've played them.
This is The Rush.
You guys already know what time it is. It was fire. And we'll be right back on the pod, and we'll be talking about it next week.
The Rush with Max Crosby. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
Stocks, precious metals, and Bitcoin kicking off the first full week of the new year on a high note, with the Dow at a record high close of 595 points. It settled at 48,977. The S&P 500 at 43 at 6902, and the Nasdaq of 160 at 23,396. The yield in the 10-year note now at 4.17%. The volatility index moving up today by 3%. Oil stocks in focus, given what's happened in Venezuela, with the U.S. taking out the Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. He made an appearance today in a federal courtroom in New York on drug charges. We'll be talking more about oil and what all this means coming up later this hour with prominent oil industry analyst John Kilduff at Again Capital and CNBC contributor. The price of oil and all this, well, moving lower. Oil at $58.12 a barrel in New York, and in London at around $61 a barrel. Precious metals back in focus, with gold hovering at or near all-time highs, up nearly $9 now at $4,460 and change. Silver at $76.10. Platinum at $2,279 and change, and palladium at $1,768 an ounce. Oil company stocks moving higher, including Chevron, moving up nearly $8 today at $163 and change. ExxonMobil at nearly $3 at $125.36. Marathon Oil at nearly $10 at $174.94, and Valero up more than $15 at $180.57. The oil service names also moved up, including Schlumberger up nearly $4 at 43 and change, and Halliburton up more than $2 at 31.92. Taking a look at some of the bank names that rallied today, Goldman Sachs up more than $34 at 9.48 and change. Bank of America shares up nearly $1 at 56.89, and J.P. Morgan Chase up 8.56 at 333.04. Taking a look at the strategy shares, we see that stock moving higher today at more than 7 at 164 and change, as Bitcoin rallied above 94,000, right now just below 94K. Ethereum at 3,231, and Doge at the moment at 15 cents. Mottek On Money continues here at 790 KBC. Happy New Year. Record-shattering start to the full week on Wall Street, the first full week of the new year. The Dow nearly 600 today to a record-high close at 48,977. Another reason to break out the champagne. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent predicts Americans will see gigantic, that's his word, gigantic refund checks in the upcoming tax filing season, thanks to the tax cuts in President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill 26, shaping up to be a great year for American taxpayers. Let's find out how great. Joining us live now is Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform. Grover, Happy New Year to you, sir.
Absolutely. Happy New Year to you. We're just starting off pretty well.
That's fantastic. Bigger refunds, gigantic refunds. Tell us what we can expect in 26.
Well, the reason why Secretary of Treasury, who also has been running the IRS at the same time, because the Democrats have been stalling on letting President Trump get his nominees put in, some of these guys have 2 and 3 jobs, and the Treasury Secretary has been one of those. So he keeps an eye on the IRS. I mean, it is under Treasury, but he's also been running it too. And the reason why more Americans will be getting larger refunds than they had expected, and what you want is zero refunds. You don't want to not pay the money in the first place if you didn't own it. But sometimes you overpay to be safe. What happened this year is that the Big Beautiful Bill, the tax cut, had many, many pieces to it. There were many different kinds of tax cuts. And some Americans understandably said, well, the bill didn't pass until July, so I probably only got a half a year of that tax cut. No tax on tips, less tax on Social Security, full expensing for business investment, my lower tax rates, all of those. But the Republicans were very clear. CBS may not have covered it. Public broadcasting may not have mentioned it. But from day one, the Republicans said, we are going to pass this tax cut, and we are going to make it retroactive to the beginning of 1985, a year ago, okay? So don't plan on paying taxes on the things that we're going to cut tax on, because we're going to get rid of those.
You know what you said, 1985? Last year was 2025.
Oh, dear.
But it seems like yesterday. You're absolutely right.
Yes. All right. I'm sorry. Yes, 2025. And so that's why a lot of Americans were paying taxes thinking that they were sort of on the old tax bill. But the good news is that those tax cuts did pass. They were retroactive to the beginning of 2025. And that's why the IRS has gone, uh-oh, all this lovely money we have, we don't get to keep it.
Wow. Well, so we can expect good things in 26. And, of course, it's just been about a year now since President Trump took office. And certainly want to remind the folks what it might have looked like had it gone the other way, right?
Well, we kind of know. We had 20% inflation during the Biden period. We had hundreds of billions of dollars in new regulatory burdens, ones that he passed, ones that Obama passed, ones that were going to click in years later. And now they're not going to happen. The White House has said, look, we're going to be looking for energy, not locking up the nation so that we don't have energy. We are going to have cars that people want, not cars that some person who lives in a penthouse in New York thinks that all the peasants should have little teeny cars that aren't very safe and barely can, just can't carry a family in. All those rules that they had on how much energy you're allowed, how much gasoline you're allowed to use. This is now up to the American people to make these decisions. The whole idea of having the government regulate your dishwasher and your washing machines at home so that it takes you longer to get everything done, all of that is being set down and reduced, and it is a huge, huge change and benefit for the American people in reducing costs. That's what makes costs go down, less regulations.
On your live with Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform. Is there going to be another government shutdown? Are we going to see more drama in 26?
Well, I don't think the shutdown really did anything for the Democrats. They were sort of hoping to get some sort of political benefit from it. That didn't seem to really work. We have gotten a lot of the budget done. We can do more of the budget through another reconciliation package and do the spending that way. It's simple majority, House and Senate. And a lot of what we needed on defense was defense spending and border security. These were all done within reconciliation. So many of the Republican agenda items and things the Democrats wouldn't fight us on were done either through reconciliation or through regular order. We actually passed a defense bill through regular order. Maybe the Democrats, have some needs or want to be serious about national defense in a world where the Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranians are running around in Venezuela and Colombia, Cuba, Nicaragua. They seem to be waking up to some of the threats to the United States.
All right. Obviously, you got a front row seat to all of this, so you'll be keeping us well informed, certainly with Venezuela at the moment, front and center.
Wow. Yeah.
Anything that, any other reaction that you're picking up on what happened over the weekend?
Well, a couple of things. Venezuela has the largest amount of oil under its ground anywhere in the world, I guess. And they were putting out 3 million barrels. They're now down to 500,000. Because they run a socialist economy, they've really destroyed the economy. 5, 6, 7 million people have fled the country. If they just get a democratically elected guy, and of course the guy who's running it didn't win the election, but he kept himself in power. If we can get a democratic and free Venezuela, a lot of people can come home who want to come home. And there's a lot of work to be done rebuilding those oil facilities and the pipelines and everything else that were allowed to rot because socialism doesn't work very well. And they won't have to spend a lot of money. They subsidize Cuban troops and Cuban security people who basically control much of the government. And they will stop subsidizing Castro's Cuba or communist Cuba. That's a big step forward too. Russia's been subsidized by Venezuelan oil. So is China. They've been bleeding Venezuela on behalf of Iran, Cuba, Russia, and China.
On the air live with Grover Norquist, President of Americans for Tax Reform. I know you were very close to President Reagan back in the day, and I had the honor of being present when President Reagan gave his last speech, which was to the Cuban American National Foundation in Miami, and he started off by saying he always had the dream that from the North Slope of Alaska to the tip of Tierra del Fuego, freedom would ring, and only Cuba at the time, this was right after the fall of the Soviet Union, was communist, and then, of course, Venezuela and Nicaragua somehow put Ortega in power there. But a lot of talk now about what's going to happen next with Cuba and Nicaragua. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, with Venezuela off the table as a financer of undermining the other countries, that's a big help. Of subsidizing the socialist failure in the other countries, that's a big help. I think you're going to see a move. You saw this in Argentina. Argentina used to be a complete mess. Well, first of all, it was once one of the richest nations in the world. Then it decided to become socialist under Perón and all those characters. And the government stole all the money and owned everything and ran things. And they organized everything through the labor unions to tell the workers how to behave and what to do and what not to do. They really had a little police state going there, and they drove it into the ground, and now it's turning around, and amazing progress in Argentina, and in you saw an overwhelming victory for Milei, and then Chile, which had been moving free market and becoming very successful, and then over time they elected communists, serious communists, not just call so many names communists, to the leadership. And they were just rejected in one of the most overwhelming votes. It's like 60-40, huge vote in that country. And that's when the communists had a lot of time to get themselves in charge, and make sure that nobody could ever come back. And they still lost. So Chile's moving in the right direction, and will probably, make all the progress, get back to some of the progress it had before. Latin America is moving in a generally good direction. And by taking one of the worst actors out that was actively allowing itself to be a colony of the Soviet Union and China, with an Iran flavoring in there some, various ways, this is a very, very helpful project line. I don't know that Nicaragua continues as a dictatorship. I think that they'll also begin. Our friends in Costa Rica are moving in the right direction. There's a lot of good progress there. Mexico is always a mess, but that's got to be something that can turn around.
I have a lot to talk about in 26. Grover Norquist, President of Americans for Tax Reform. Thank you very much, Grover. We wish you and everyone there a happy, healthy, and prosperous new year, and look forward to many more conversations here live on the air. Thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon.
The UCLA men's basketball season's in full swing, and we need you to get to Pauley Pavilion to support the Bruins. Don't miss a single chance to see this year's exciting team, led by Donovan Dent, Eric Daly Jr., Sky Clark, and Tyler Bilodeau. Pauley Pavilion, presented by Westcon Financials, the home of the greatest tradition in all of college basketball. We can't wait to have you join us as the Bruins continue to build on that legacy. With big-time matchups, go to UCLABruins.com/tickets to secure your seats today before it's too late. Let's get Pauley rocking.
Hey, I'm Chris Van Vliet. This is Insight with Chris Van Vliet. Go behind the scenes and beyond the headlines with people like John Cena.
That's where Never Give Up comes from. I wasn't Brock. I wasn't Roman. I wasn't Dwayne. I was last.
And the biggest names in pro wrestling and beyond.
It's a legitimate interview.
This is Insight with
Chris Van Vliet.
Insight with Chris Van Vliet. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
Thank you.
Mottek On Money continues, 790 KBC. Happy New Year. Venezuelan Americans celebrating in the streets all over the place as the U.S. captured Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro and his wife and took them out of Venezuela to face justice here in the United States. The ousted Venezuelan leader pleaded not guilty to narco-trafficking charges during his arraignment in a federal courtroom in New York today. Looks like the oil company stocks are rallied on all of the epic developments over the weekend. Let's bring in prominent oil analyst John Kilduff now at Again Capital, CNBC contributor and longtime contributor to this program. John Kilduff, Happy New Year. Thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon.
Yes, Happy New Year to you, Frank. Always great to be on with you.
Wonderful to have you with us. On if 2025 wasn't epic enough, we're starting here 26 with this big news here. Give us your reaction to what happened over the weekend.
Well, I think your catchphrase is hear it tonight, read about it tomorrow. You and I talked about this very scenario about a month and a half ago now, I think, at this point. And it was, it was really epic, but it was also somewhat anticlimactic at the same time, Frank, because, going in, getting rid of Maduro, there was a sense that there was going to be a real change forced upon Venezuela. And we're just not seeing that right now. Initially, oil prices were lower Sunday night, last night, when they first started trading. But it's become clear that for now, the only thing that has changed is that President Maduro has obviously been captured and is now going to be put on trial. We still have now his vice president, who was also the former head of the PDVSA oil company there. The blockade or quarantine, as it's technically referred to, also very much in place, so much so that there was a fun thing to watch, all these tankers trying to skedaddle like roaches when you turn the lights on in a New York City apartment, the way they took off earlier today and during the overnight. So we're not getting any additional oil, from my lane here anytime soon, unfortunately. But the hopes are, and I will tell you that there had been massive investment over the decades from the likes of Conoco, Exxon, and Chevron, who continues to fight it out and continue to pump there, that they'll get in there and do some reclamation and get their investments back in the billions. So there's a lot of hopefulness, but for now, it's actually gotten slightly worse, if you can believe it, at least from an oil perspective. And a global economy perspective.
See it tonight, read about it tomorrow, but hear it now live on the air. Mottek on Money on 790 KABC, along with John KILDUFF, oil industry analyst at, again, Capital. Today, we certainly saw a positive reaction on Wall Street to all this, with the oil names led by Chevron up nearly $8 today at $163 and change. And we see Valero also up by more than $15 at $180 and change. And the oil services names, Halliburton and Schlumberger, also getting a pop. From an investment standpoint, where would you be placing your bets?
Well, you want to actually be careful on this one. Who's going to do great are the three you just mentioned, ExxonMobil, Chevron, Conoco, because they will have the opportunity to recoup billions of dollars of investments that they put in to Venezuela. Look, Frank, these are early hours. Forget about it being early days. There's going to be a meeting here later in the week with the Energy Secretary, Chris Wright. So the plans are being formulated for a re-entry of U.S. oil interests into Venezuela. They're going to do terrific, as are the Gulf Coast refiners. So Phillips 66, Valero, others who have refineries along the U.S. Gulf Coast region, because you and I have talked about this too. They refine heavy sour crude, mostly these days from Canada. But back in the day when they were planned and built, it was to manufacture gasoline and diesel fuel out of that heavy Venezuelan oil. So that's why you saw those stocks rebound, because they could potentially here recoup literally billions of dollars.
Is that Venezuelan oil refined here in California?
It could be, Frank. That's the nature of it. It's that type of La Brea tar pit type of petroleum that your refiners there, to the extent they're still open, of course, would be able to take as well. But that grade, if we get more supply from Venezuela, it'll push the price of Canadian crude down. It'll push the price of all crude grades lower, because we'll have, once again, the commodity market will see a reliable source of supply, particularly here for the U.S. So our oil will be even cheaper than the global benchmarks. U.S. consumers and our economy will have an advantage, a built-in advantage, from getting that Venezuelan oil, even a portion of it, even a slug of it, back onto the market in a steady fashion.
It's interesting you mentioned the La Brea tar pits. I drove by there with some visitors over the weekend and pointed it out. It's basically an oil pit. LA is swimming in oil, actually, right? 100 years ago, California accounted for 25% of the world's oil production. We're absolutely swimming in oil, but because of government policies, it's not being brought up as it used to be. And now with refineries closing, another big story we're following here in California is how high gas prices are going to go. Based on the cards on the table with the expected refinery closings and so forth, what do you see ahead for gas prices and all this?
In California, you're not going to get much in the way of relief. They should get capped. You will get a little bit of a break and feel some of the lower global oil price, but nowhere near the kind of discounting that you should benefit from. You and I have talked about this. There are plans on the drawing board for some pipelines that are in place to reverse themselves and get some of this Gulf Coast refined product out your way. But it's going to take these high prices for a while for California drivers, unfortunately, to suffer under before that'll come to fruition so that the oil companies can bank on sort of a return on their investment to make that all happen. I do believe it will happen, Frank, but there's just going to be some pain here in the near term. But again, you get a steady source of supply out of Venezuela back on the market, and that is an oil-rich area. Their neighbor Guyana has already gotten their oil production up to about 1 million barrels a day in just several years' time. That's the other thing I would tell everyone. You're hearing a lot of other analysts out there talk about how it's going to take billions, it's going to take years. Let me tell you something. The equipment that's there on the ground that has been left to languish is the equipment of Exxon, of Chevron, of ConocoPhillips. They know what's there. They can fix it. This isn't going to Mars, okay? This is pushing oil through a pipeline, refining it a bit, and getting it on ships to get it here to be refined the rest of the way. It will happen. It'll happen more quickly than you're, I think, hearing from a lot of other folks out there.
And wasn't Citgo a name associated with Venezuela as well? What happened to Citgo?
With Citgo, of course, Frank, very much a part of all this. They are part of the whole commercial disputes between and among Exxon and Chevron and Conoco. They have been the subject of litigation as well. But yes, PDVSA, the national state oil company of Venezuela, which owned Citgo, was a crown jewel. It was an amazing national oil company. They actually produced more oil than Saudi Arabia at one point going back in the day, and they caused fights among OPEC to fight for U.S. market share. It was such a benefit to the United States to have a strong oil production presence from Venezuela, from PDVSA, and from Citgo, even to this day to a lesser degree. A lot of that can come back, Frank, again, relatively quickly.
Are there still Citgo stations out there?
Here in the Northeast, there are, yes, sir, and big heating oil distributor. Mostly now, it's sort of storage tank facilities and the like. But yes, Citgo is still very much with us.
Very interesting. Well, we're going to keep an open line to you, John, on all of this. More epic developments, of course, following the attack on Iran last year, which blew out their nuclear program. And here we have oil prices hovering around 58 and change. Is that what you're seeing at the moment? Can you give us a quote here on how oil is looking here as we head into tomorrow?
Yeah, up about $1, from last night's opening price, Frank, but still about $58 a barrel for WTI. Brent crude down around the $61, $62 a barrel mark. Again, a lot of nervousness in the market because of this military activity, and also Iran could be the next domino to fall.
Yeah. John, thank you very much for that. John KILDUFF, prominent oil analyst at Again Capital, CNBC contributor, longtime contributor to all of us here on Mottek On Money on 790 KABC. Los Angeles, California.
The UCLA men's basketball season's in full swing, and we need you to get to Pauley Pavilion to support the Bruins. Don't miss a single chance to see this year's exciting team, led by Donovan Dent, Eric Daly Jr., Sky Clark, and Tyler Bilodeau. Pauley Pavilion, presented by Westcom Financials, the home of the greatest tradition in all of college basketball. We can't wait to have you join us as the Bruins continue to build on that legacy. With big-time matchups, go to UCLABruins.com/tickets to secure your seats today before it's too late. Let's get Pauley rocking.